It's Michelle here from the Foodie Safety team. I'm the Head of Safety and Wellbeing at Foodstuffs. And I've been asked to have a conversation today about hazard and risk management and how we can make our workplaces safer. Under the Act, we are required as businesses to manage risk and keep our workers safe. And one of the ways, or two of the ways we're required to do this is by either eliminating harm or minimising harm and risk from our workplace. That's easier said than done. One of the things we have found at Foodstuffs is there was some confusion between the difference between a hazard and a risk and how risk management is actually done. So wanted to try and clear that up for you today with just a simple conversation over the next few minutes. What's the definition of a hazard? I ask this in lots of training sessions and I get a variety of answers. Same with the definition of a risk. They are two different things. A hazard is anything that has the potential to cause harm. And harm either happens acutely, as in an immediate response, or it happens chronically over time. And that would be something like asbestos causes harm over time. A risk, conversely, is the possibility that harm might occur when you're exposed to the hazard. And the important point here is if there's no hazard, ideally, effectively, there's no risk. And risk relates to the likelihood and the consequence or the severity of the hazard causing harm. So how badly and how often can something like this cause harm? Controls are the barriers or defences that we put in place to prevent an incident or harm from occurring and minimise the damage if it does occur. So 4 things: hazard, anything that has the potential to cause harm, harm either acute or chronic. Risk is a combination of the likelihood and severity that harm might occur when you're exposed to a hazard, and the controls are the things that we do in the workplace to prevent harm from occurring or minimise it if it does. Here's a simple scenario, right? A hazard, like we said, something that has the potential to cause harm. So we all know that sharks are dangerous, right? Sharks can cause harm. If you stand on the beach, the hazard exists, but you're not exposed to it. So the risk is virtually minimal. If, however, you get in the water and you're wearing a black wetsuit and it's lunchtime for sharks, your risk increases exponentially. If you are faced with a white pointer versus a nurse shark, for example, again, your risk increases exponentially. Let's talk about some examples of risk management in the workplace. So we at Foodstuffs use forklifts, and they're a classic hazard that has the potential to cause harm for us. We invoke the hierarchy of controls and we either try and eliminate or we minimise. So we eliminate one of the hazards associated with forklifts, which is LPG forklifts. We've eliminated those and we have used instead electric forklifts. So that's a simple kind of methodology there. If you can't eliminate a hazard, the legislation suggests you must minimise. And under minimise, there are various different steps that you can take. You can substitute, isolate, use engineered controls, use admin controls, or provide and use PPE for your workers. The law requires us to take reasonably practicable steps. And that's based on availability, it's based on cost, it's based on the severity. So there are a number of things to consider in that respect. If we look at how we might minimise the risk associated with the hazard of forklifts, substitution is a method that we can use. Isolation, so we at Foodstuffs, we limit access to our distribution centres, for example, so that we don't expose people to forklifts. We use a variety of engineering controls, and they might be governors or speed devices. There's lights, there's seat belts, there's braking systems, there's preventative maintenance, there's a bunch of engineered controls that we use. In addition, we also not just work on the machinery and the controls that are related to that, but we also look at our workplace. So we have things like pedestrian segregation systems, we have gates that sort of slow people down before they step into a thoroughfare, we have painted walkways, We have a variety of things that sort of manage the interaction and provide engineered solutions to manage the interaction between mechanical handling equipment and people in our workplace. In terms of admin controls, these are methods of work or processes and largely paperwork. And they would be things like licensing, training, SOPs, permission to use equipment, that kind of written sign-off. And then lastly, our last line of defence is PPE, and that typically for us is a high-vis jacket and a set of steel cat boots. So if you look at the left-hand side of the image, you'll see that at the top, elimination and minimisation with substitution, isolation and engineered controls are the most effective. And the least effective at the bottom of the page is admin controls and PPE. And that's largely because admin controls and PPE depend on humans to actually remember them, apply them, use them on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. So it's often a combination of those controls that actually gets you the most robust risk management in a workplace. Just to recap, hazards, anything that has the potential to cause harm. Harm happens acutely or chronically. Risk is the possibility that harm might occur, and the controls are those things that are referred to in that hierarchy of controls. So there are a variety of workplace steps that you would take to manage the hazard to reduce the risk. And that's always the focus, right? We want to reduce the risk, manage the hazard, reduce the risk so that people go home safely. I think that's all I've got to say. I hope this kind of quick overview has been useful to people. We do encourage you to work with your teams to understand the difference between a hazard and a risk and apply really meaningful controls in a robust and useful way. So please stay safe, and I hope this has been useful. Thanks.